Good afternoon, everyone. This is Meg and Sarah, the director of AmeriCorps VISTA, and it is so great to be joining all of you. I love seeing where folks are joining us from. I highly encourage you to use the chat and let us and each other know where you are dialing in from. So city, state, territory, organization, whatever you feel comfortable sharing, it's great to see and hear. And we are so glad that you're with us. We have got a lot to cover today. And one quick note, the recording for this call will actually be on the AmeriCorps website on the sponsor page, not Vista Campus. We will correct that for the next time. But let's get into our call because we've got a lot to talk about. First, I wanted to just provide a brief overview around our budget. There has been lots of talk about what's been going on in Congress, and I want to just give you sort of refresh or remind people how VISTA as a program is funded and also where things currently stand. Want to talk briefly about the child tax credit, which has been a big priority for us, and I know for many of you. Do a quick report back on our summer associates, which was our first phase of the American Rescue Plan implementation for VISTA, and then turn it over to my colleague, Rob Cox, who is going to talk about the VISTA Progress Report Supplement. And then after we get through all that, we are going to make sure to leave time for question and answer. So, and just as was explained at the top of the call, feel free to use the chat with comments. If you do have questions for the call, we encourage you to use the Q&A section of the call. All right, so with that, let's get into budget. Next slide. You can go one more. Great. So my kids have been embracing Schoolhouse Rock. So I sort of think about this a little bit as AmeriCorps VISTA Budget Schoolhouse Rock Edition. So I want to just kind of briefly either share, or for those of you who already know, kind of remind you about how AmeriCorps VISTA is funded, and then kind of where things currently stand for fiscal year 2022. So as everyone knows, AmeriCorps is a federal agency, which is funded annually by Congress. So every year we get a budget that has sort of two big chunks in it. The first are program-specific dollars. These include dollars that are specifically tied to the four programs that make up AmeriCorps. So AmeriCorps State and National, ASN, AmeriCorps Seniors, ACS, VISTA, and then NCCC. And those are dollars that can only be spent on program. And we refer to those as OPE. So those are operating dollars. Then we also get a second bucket of money, and that is called, that's kind of for everything else, you know, the overall agency operations, right? All the work, the back end work that supports the program work, and we call that salaries and expenses, S&E, because as I like to say with AmeriCorps, where there's a will, there's an acronym. So I'm bringing you into the acronym world. The vast majority of VISTA's operating expenses, those OPE dollars, are spent on our members, right? That is the overwhelming majority of our program, and of that, the living allowance. But it also goes into program and support grants, and then small amounts of it also support member recruitment activities, which is another place where we can use those program dollars. You know, my salary, the salary of other VISTA staff at VISTA headquarters, with the exception of a few who support member recruitment and member services, are all funded by salaries and expenses. So it really is the combination of those two things that represents the VISTA budget. There are some additional sources of money that we get. So sometimes you can have, you know, discrete amounts of money associated with a particular bill. So we're going to talk about the American Rescue Plan, ARP. That had money attached to it to do certain things. It's also time bound. It's only for 3 years. We also have something called interagency agreements, which is when another federal agency gives us some of their money to spend. So for instance, right now, AmeriCorps VISTA has an active interagency agreement with HUD. You may have heard about Public AmeriCorps. That is a brand new $400 million interagency agreement between AmeriCorps State and National and the CDC. So those are some other sources of money, but they are discrete and associated with certain periods of time and certain projects. Next slide. So if that's the background in terms of how it all works, where are things right now? So you may have heard that things have been busy up on Capitol Hill. And as of right now, as of today, AmeriCorps actually does not have our fiscal year 22 budget. So that goes for VISTA, that goes for the overall agency, that goes for the entire federal government. We are currently operating under a continuing resolution. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as a CR, until December 3rd, 2021. So this is all the conversation around, is the federal government going to shut down? Yes or no? They kind of brought it right to the wire, but it and basically gave an extension. Congress gave itself an extension to work out these details until December 3rd, 2021. Despite not having our final congressionally approved budget for fiscal year 2022, we are still moving forward with our fiscal year 22 programming. And as just a quick reminder, our fiscal year begins on October 1st of every year. So we just started fiscal year 2022, despite the fact that it's calendar year 2021. And so, as you know, we implemented a significant living allowance increase that was effective on August 15th of 2021. That is still being maintained and we're moving forward. That applies to all VISTAs who are serving, and about 88% of VISTAs were impacted by that minimum living allowance increase. And we also are working with our colleagues in the Office of Regional Operations, which is our field workforce. That's where all of your portfolio managers are based. And we have basically granted them provisional MSY dollars, which are the dollars that fund, VISTAs, and grant dollars to work with based on their plans. So despite the fact that we don't have a final full year fiscal year 22 budget, programmatically, we have enough of a sense of where we're going. And the way that our program works is we can still move forward. So what this means for you is we can absolutely still be moving forward. And you should all continue to do the great work that you're doing. Next slide. I think as many of you know, I am still relatively new to this work, and I assumed the director role this past January. Spent quite a bit of time learning, including talking with many sponsors and current members, as well as staff, and really have landed on these 4 priorities. So as you think about your current VISTA project, maybe you're considering expanding your project, you also have amazing friends and colleagues at other organizations and agencies, maybe they are interested in a VISTA project, and we encourage that. For the VISTA program for the next 3 years, our priorities really will all fit into this list of 4 priorities. So first and foremost, we are deepening our program impact. So we want to make sure that we have this incredible resource in terms of our VISTAs, right? The members who serve, as well as, program and support grant dollars. We really want to make sure that we continue to think and push the envelope around how we use these precious resources to address community needs and ultimately build sustained capacity, kind of going to our original charge of VISTA. And we also, as part of that, want to prioritize projects that advance racial equity. So that is something that is new, that you'll continue to hear from the administration, the agency, as well as from me as VISTA director. Second, we want to ensure that, that we are doing all we can to serve those who are in greatest need. And so a lot of work that we're doing with our colleagues in the Office of Regional Operations is really thinking through how do we kind of reprioritize and recenter the VISTA portfolio on the constituencies who are in deep poverty. And what does that look like within a region, within a state, across regions? And so that's also something, VISTA is unique in AmeriCorps in the sense of our entire program is focused on alleviating poverty. And particularly right now, with so many critical needs, we want to make sure that we're reaching those who are in greatest need. Third, really want to kind of recommit ourselves to enhancing the quality of the member experience. It's part of VISTA's special sauce is the fact that the projects do great work and build capacity that's ultimately sustained. And it's also a transformative experience on the part of the individual who gives that year of service or that 8, 9, 10 weeks of service in the summer. And to do that, we're going to be expanding our training for sponsors and for members, really expanding the toolkit that you have to work with. And we're also going to be increasing our investment in support grant funds because we know that having those things to be able to support the VISTA, in addition to their living allowance, right, and the benefits that they receive individually is really critically important. And so we will be looking to expand the resources that we provide through support grants. And then finally, we want to make sure that we expand access to participation. So one of the key ways that this, forms this take is going to be raising the living allowance, which has already happened in August. But we also really want to expand our outreach and recruitment so that anyone who wants to serve really is able to. And we know we've got to do more work to remove some of those barriers. So as you think about your own work, you're already doing so much of this work. What I love to share with people when they ask me about VISTA and sort of what are we doing that's different, I really do continue to believe that VISTA was made for this moment. And it's really about kind of clearing away and creating space and greater supports for VISTA to do its thing. So you are already doing this work. I'm asking you to recommit to it and also help us find others who can engage with us. So to that end, we'll go to next slide. I want to make sure that everyone knows what our deadlines are for upcoming concept papers. Again, this doesn't apply to you because you already have your existing sponsor, you already have a VISTA project, you have gone through this process, you successfully made it through. But again, your networks are incredibly powerful. You know the other visionary leaders who are in your communities who might be interested in a VISTA, particularly right now. So we do encourage you to help spread the word. It's a non-competitive process. There are 4 deadlines throughout the year. You can see the next one is November 3rd. Of 2021. The other 3 are in calendar year 2022. And that's the opportunity to submit a concept paper, which is the first of a 2-step process. If folks have questions, they're not quite sure, absolutely reach out to their portfolio manager in their region. It's the best way to start. So that is just kind of like a quick and overview in terms of where we stand around the budget. How we're funded, where we stand, and kind of what's going to be most important for us moving forward. All right, we will change gears here. And speaking of talking about what's most important, we are going to now talk about the child tax credit. So I just want to spend a few minutes here. Next slide. I want to spend a few minutes here because you've heard from me on the child tax credit via email. And we also did a sponsor training on this issue back in July, but it's so critically important that I want to make sure that we make room for it, kind of remind you around how it works, particularly because there's an upcoming deadline. So just for those of you who may be new to the child tax credit, which again, where there's a will, there's an acronym, you're going to hear me refer to it as CTC, but this is a quick refresher on what the child tax credit is. So next slide. So the child tax credit is actually an expanded credit. It previously existed, but through the American Rescue Plan, ARP, it expanded how much was given through the child tax credit and also changed how it was administered. So it greatly expanded who qualified for the full credit. And then it also changed the administration of it, the dissemination of these funds by making it a direct deposit and allowing for half to come in advance. And so what that's led to is on average, families with children, depending on how old the children are, I've been getting a check on average of about $450 per month. And the checks or the checks, the payments are wired on the 15th. And so it's a really different thing rather than getting a lump sum. You know that it's coming, and there's not a lot of work required in getting it for the vast majority of people. And it's money that's critically needed, right? People are spending it on childcare, they're spending it on food, they're spending it, some folks are saving for college. It's really up to the family in terms of how they want to spend it. So that's what the child tax credit is, and the changes made by the American Rescue Plan. Next slide. This is a really powerful policy, particularly in addressing childhood poverty. So it has the potential of having childhood poverty in this country but only if it actually reaches all who are eligible. And while the vast majority of people do automatically qualify, there's still work to be done to reach what is kind of referred to as the non-filer population. So people who hadn't previously filed taxes in 2019 or 2020 and didn't sign up for a stimulus check, one of the 3 previous stimulus checks. If you are in one or multiple of those categories, you automatically got the child tax credit and started getting those payments in July. However, if you didn't do any of those, there is an additional steps. And we know based on research that many of the non-filers are some of the most, some are the families that are facing some of the most challenging life circumstances and poverty. And so it's really critically important that to achieve the full effect of the policy, that everyone who's eligible for the credit actually gets it, and it's a time-bound window. So Congress is currently discussing whether or not it'll be extended and or made permanent, but as of right now, it's only through the rest of this year, and the ability for non-filers to sign up is only through November 15th. So we really felt as an agency, this is bigger than just VISTA, that there was an incredible opportunity for us to kind of sound the word to our networks and partners, our grantees, sponsors, and members, to basically say, this is really important. And you may know of, you may be, there may be someone you're related to, but most often there's someone that you're supporting through your work who may be a non-filer. And so we did a bunch of trainings in partnership with the White House and the Treasury. You can see, again, the sponsor training that we had for VISTA sponsors was this past July. We did another training for members who had incredible questions on August 18th. And actually all 4 of the programs have been doing this training. And so all told, we've had over 1,500 people who received the child tax credit directly, directly participated. And then we recorded all these and continue to disseminate them. And so it's a powerful kind of training opportunity. Next slide. In addition to the training, we've also kind of focused on some partnerships that we think can really ensure that we reach that non-filer community. What the form that's taken is AmeriCorps Seniors has a really exciting partnership with Head Start to actually provide older volunteers in Head Start centers to walk non-filer families through the process and actually sign them up. Really exciting partnership. VISTA has a long history of working with HUD, and we have over 200 VISTAs who are currently in projects that are in some way partnered with HUD. And so we've been working with our colleagues over at HUD at the federal level to really share the word and make sure that everyone is taking advantage of it and that our counterparts are working with each other. What's exciting about this is it's kind of recommitting to a partnership that I think is a tremendously powerful one. And we know anecdotally through our colleagues in the Office of Regional Operations that these conversations about the child tax credit are opening the door to talk about a wide range of issues, all of which are in service to low-income families. So I'm excited about the CTC partnership, but also know that even more exciting work will happen. So this is in places like Promise Zones and Vision Centers and other places where we have shared partnerships. And then ASN and NCCC have also been pursuing partnerships, again, really focused on that non-filer density communities. Next slide. But wait, there's more. In addition, I really felt as director that this was a just too important of an opportunity to sit out, particularly when I think about the people that VISTA has always been designed to serve, individuals and families in poverty. And so, we know that this money can really be catalytic and can be a real difference maker for these families. And so in addition to the training and the focused partnerships, I sent out a communication about issuing essentially a discrete time period where VISTA projects can exercise program flexibility around the child tax credit. So this program flexibility is still in effect. It's September 13th through November 15th. It is an opt-in. So it's something that you have to choose to do, but it's a very easy thing to choose to do. But anyone who's currently serving, any current sponsor can elect to basically incorporate child tax credit activities that could include outreach, education, or direct enrollment of individuals around the child tax credit without having to go through what is normally, a several step process of adjusting the volunteer assignment description, the VAD. So for this finite period of time, September 13th through November 15th, and only related to child tax credit activities, you can basically pursue that just by sending an email to your portfolio manager, because it's helpful for us to know about who's taking on this work. So if this is not something that you have yet exercised and want to, I really encourage you to do it. This really can be a game changer for families in terms of getting this cash. Once they're also signed up to get the child tax credit, they automatically receive all 3 previous stimulus checks as well. So this is really meaningful money for families who just have a lot of needs right now and can really be a difference maker. If you have questions about this, don't hesitate to reach out to your portfolio manager. We also have, go to our next slide. We also have a bunch of resources that we've kind of organized to make this really easy for you to access, including the past recordings from the webinars that actually walk you through the non-filer portal and have some other resources. So if you go to the VISTA campus, you can access that. So don't be bashful. There's no such thing as a stupid question on this. I myself have asked many questions. I wish it was more straightforward and easier, but this really is an incredible opportunity and one that I wanted to make sure that all VISTA sponsors were aware of. And for those of you who want to take advantage of it, that you do, because again, it's an incredible opportunity. All right, so that is the child tax credit. And now we are going to just do a brief update around the American Rescue Plan update, and then I'm going to stop talking because you are hearing a ton from me. But as folks remember, the American Rescue Plan was a piece of legislation passed by Congress that included a wide range of resources to support really kind of recovery from COVID-19, as well as other interlocking crises that the country is currently facing. It led to significant funding for AmeriCorps as an agency, and of that, about 80 million specifically for AmeriCorps VISTA. So if we go to the next slide. Of that 80 million, and it's 80 million over 3 years, we have 3 priorities in terms of how we're using those funds. The first is we wanted to provide immediate relief by expanding the number of summer associates who were serving in the summer of 2021. So right off the bat, we're basically essentially the first thing that AmeriCorps did with these additional resources was expand our summer associates by about 1,000. Second, as we've discussed before, we want to raise the living allowance for all VISTA members, and we put that into effect on August 15th. The new minimum is $15,002 in terms of our minimum living allowance, which reaches through that, as well as our annual cost of living adjustments, reaches about 88% of all currently serving VISTAs. And then finally, we want to expand the number of people that we're serving by increasing the number of VISTA projects, the number of VISTAs who are serving, and we want to, as I said before, prioritize communities that are in highest need. So we will have more VISTAs due to the additional funding provided by the American Rescue Plan dollars. So those are our 3 priorities. Today, I'm just gonna kind of report back on the first one, which is summer associates. So we'll go to next slide. So, the summer associate project, the summer associate program is such an interesting one to me. The 3/4 of the year, we sort of do one thing, and then for part of the year, we layer on this other component. And with very, very little notice, many of you were able to expand your projects, which is nothing short of incredible. So we ended the summer with 186 summer associate project sponsors. We had 786 summer associate project sites, and those were in 49 states and territories. So almost every single part of the United States, which is really exciting. Next slide. In terms of focus area, it was interesting. We didn't actually see a huge change in where our summer associate projects were focused. They were focused on education, they were focused on healthy futures, a lot of work on food insecurity, and then economic opportunity. And, when I've been sharing this information with the White House, with folks at OMB, I've really stressed that VISTA is such a powerful program in terms of meeting critical needs. We haven't really needed to change that much because because of all of you and the great work that you lead, as well as our amazing VISTA members, we're already doing what's most urgent. We're already helping those in greatest need. And so it really is about strengthening the work that we're doing, expanding access to it, both for new sponsors and members, and making sure that we have the resources to do it and to do it well. But to me, this really says and is testament to the power of the VISTA program and all of the work that you do as our sponsors, that we're already there. And don't actually need to, make significant changes. And because your communities so well, you're able to make the appropriate pivots because you're already in touch with them. They're your communities, they're part of the planning process, and you know them best. And so I think it's just a tremendous validation of the VISTA program model. Next slide. As I said before, we increased by about 1,000 the number of summer associates who served. So we had 2,759 summer associates, which is unbelievable. The fact that we're able to add an additional 1,000 members with quite literally like 2.5 months is just incredible. And we had a very high service completion rate. So 95% of those, 2,700 members completed their 8, 9, or 10 weeks of full-time service, which is just great. And again, a huge testament to your work. There are a couple lessons learned. Next slide. So we've been having some debriefs. I'm sure that many of you have done some reflection. I know many of you have shared feedback with our colleagues in the Office of Regional Operations. I want to make sure that we're continuing to always learn both what works, right, and how we replicate it, but also, what didn't work, and how do we continue to learn from that, get better, stronger, and really maximize these incredible resources that we have. So a couple of the lessons learned that were really top of mind for us that I wanted to share with you is, just as I said before, VISTA is already engaging in the critical work of supporting high need communities and is so embedded within our communities that when a pivot is needed, you're already there. You're 5 steps ahead. And so there isn't really a need for something new or different. It's much more about sustaining and enhancing the existing work, and then scaling it, right? Both in terms of more people serving as well as more communities, more sponsors. But it's a huge testament to the program model itself. Advanced knowledge of funding increases is hugely helpful. So it is amazing what you were able to do, with literally 2 months notice. And I don't want to minimize that at all. However, if we would have had 6 months of notice, I think we could have done even more. And so that's something particularly for those we work with around, kind of our funding and our apportionment, which is like when we get the money. I've really stressed that even if you can give us, a couple more months, it can really be a difference maker in terms of being able to more fully realize the resources. And then finally, we do some basic things, as a program to provide information and support summer associates to consider, participating in the full year program. And I think there's definitely sponsors who are really thoughtful about how to do this. And, not every summer associate is going to be a fit for the full year program. And we know that. But I think that more of them can be, and it may be for the upcoming year, it may be in a couple years. And so one of the things I've been talking about with Beth and my colleagues in the marketing outreach and recruitment team is, how can we provide even more supports to be able to help people build on the summer associate experience and consider additional service, whether it's in the short term, long term, VISTA, maybe another AmeriCorps program, but it's such an incredible way to get started. And we want to make sure that we're making it available for those who are interested. So those are a couple lessons learned. If you have other lessons learned from your own work, if you hosted summer associates this year, please share them in the chat. We'd love to continue to learn with you and make sure that we're getting stronger and more impactful every single year. So that was a ton of talking. I really just wanted to say thank you. I have been coming on for let's see, I'm coming on 10 months, which is kind of incredible in this director role. And every single week, I just remain so deeply grateful and impressed by the work of our sponsors, who really, you are the ones who realize this work. And whether it's the summer associates or as we think about, those 4 principles, right? Deepening our impact, serving those who are in greatest need, enhancing the member experience, and expanding access, that we can't do this without you. So I just want to say a profound thank you for all that you've done for VISTA, all that you are doing for your communities. And just, I have so much excitement for what we're going to continue to do moving forward. But I'm going to stop talking because that's a lot of talking. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Rob. And Rob leads our program impact and operations team, is an incredible colleague, and he is going to talk about the VISTA project report supplement. And then we're going to go to Q&A. So if you have a question and haven't added it yet, please do in the Q&A section. And we welcome those lessons learned or other thoughts about summer associates in the chat. But Rob, are you ready?
I am ready. Thank you, Meg.
Passing the baton.
Thank you. And nice to be with you all. Hello. I'm really, you may be reading the slide and seeing report, and maybe your shoulders are going up a little bit and you're like, oh my gosh, we're going to talk about reporting. We're just going to talk about it for a minute. And we've gotten to talk about a few other things that are kind of exciting, right? We started with the budget and then how do we use that budget to set forth our priorities for where we're going, and how do we find new partners through our concept paper schedule, and then what does the work translate into, the accomplishments that you had with summer associates, and this sort of continues with how we communicate about our program and how we talk about our accomplishments and how we talk with Congress and other stakeholders, making the case for the budget that's required and needed to help carry out the work that you are doing to support the VISTA members across the country and get accomplishments in communities. And so that's really where this VISTA project report supplement comes in. This is a really important report for us. If you can go to the next slide, please, we'll show you a couple of notes that we just want to say. So this is a really important report for us for the reasons I just mentioned. It helps us in so many different ways to communicate about what is happening with our program. And every VISTA project is different. Every VISTA member's assignment is a little bit different, and you communicate that to us when you complete a concept paper, when you filled out your project application, when you helped create those VISTA assignment descriptions, and as you support your members, and when you complete your progress reports, your regular progress reports that come through twice a year, where you tell us about what's happening with your program, the successes and challenges that you are having. So the VISTA Progress Report supplement is in addition to all of those things. And this is a supplement to that, where we're not asking you about your successes and challenges. We're asking you to give us some information that speaks to some key accomplishments. And it's the same information that we're asking of all of our sponsors across the country. So this report, the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, we call it the VPRS. As Meg mentioned, we like to use our acronyms around here. The VPRS is a report that AmeriCorps sends out each October to our sponsors, to all sponsors, and we use it to ask you about key accomplishments from the past fiscal year. So we've just wrapped up, for us, the federal fiscal year 2021. And on this report, we're asking you things like how many community volunteers were recruited during the year as a result of your VISTA project, how much cash or in-kind resources were generated during the year through the project, and a handful of other questions. I think there are about 10 questions total, and that's actually down from 14 last year. It's one of our efforts to streamline some of our reporting burden on you. So we tally up the information that each of you provide through your VPRS, and we use that information to convey to all sorts of folks, including you and others, the incredible results that you're having across the country with VISTA resources. So you can see the right side of this slide has some of the impressive accomplishments that sponsors told us about in last year's VPRS data call. So you can see here VISTA projects during last the fiscal year 20, were able to leverage nearly 500,000 community volunteers who gave over 3 million hours of service in your communities to support anti-poverty programming. And so that's with just around 8,000 individuals or so who are serving with the VISTA program across the country during that time. And I think that data point really shows what a catalyst for community involvement VISTA members are. We also learned through the VPRS in the prior year that VISTAs and you helped raise $199 million in cash and in-kind donations to support anti-poverty programming. And that's pretty remarkable. It's around twice what Congress provides to AmeriCorps to run the entire AmeriCorps VISTA program. So the VPRS is ready for you to complete. A few weeks ago on October 1st, the folks on your projects who are listed in e-grants as the project directors, the VISTA project directors should have received a message from us, from AmeriCorps, inviting you to complete the VPRS for the reporting period of October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021, which again is our FY21 fiscal year. So if you had an active memorandum of agreement and AmeriCorps VISTA members serving during that period, you'll complete the VPRS report. And the deadline for completing the report is Friday, November 12th. Once again, Friday, November 12th. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is a requirement. We do like to try and make sure we can support you in fulfilling all those requirements. And in doing so, we developed a new on-demand module. You can find it on the VISTA campus, all about how to successfully complete the VPRS. So you can see some of the instructions here to log on to the campus. Really encourage you to check that out. We're excited about it. Also, just please check your inboxes for the October 1st communication about the VPRS and mark your calendars with that November 12th date. It may take some time in planning in advance to work with your VISTA sites, your VISTA members, to collect some of that information from the past year. So we'll probably send a reminder or two before that deadline approaches. Keep an eye out in your inbox for that. And last but not least, I do just want to note that completing the VPRS is really, really important for the reasons I stated. It's also a requirement for VISTA sponsors who meet those requirements. And so we would like to reach 100% response rate this year without having to follow up with you after that deadline comes to pass. And we will if we have to, but we would really love to get as many of you completing that report by the November 12th deadline as we can. And we're really, really excited to hear about all of the great work that you have done in this past year. Meg, that is all for the VPRS. I will turn the proceedings back to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. I do want to just underscore, as someone who didn't know what VPRS stood for and still has a hard time saying it, as you can tell, this information is incredibly important and information that has been collected. So it's very helpful to be able to track over time. And I think as you all know and probably experienced, just like with us, VISTA can be a somewhat challenging program to explain. And what we find is the best way to do it is through talking about specific projects as well as, accomplishments, and a lot can be demonstrated by the information that you share here. So I know you all are busy, but I just want to underscore and say thank you for taking the time to fill it out and just how important it is. So now is the time for questions, and I'm going to bring in my colleague Beth, who leads our marketing outreach and recruitment team, to help field some questions. Beth, and please continue to add questions. If we don't have time, we'll find another way to answer them. So if you have a question and haven't added it to the Q&A section, please do that now. But Beth, what is our first question?
Meg, just before I jump into the questions, I wanted just to highlight a couple of the comments that came in when you were talking about summer associates. And Aaron with Campus Compact New Hampshire said that they had found the summer associate program as a great addition to the food insecurity project, and that they have plans to expand summer associate program for the coming year, and they're really excited about that. And Jackie, I'm not sure what program Jackie is or project Jackie is with, but they had 204 summer associates in 2020, and that their site really appreciates this program as much as the full-time VISTAs. So just wanted to share that with you really quickly before we jump into the questions.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So the first question, I'm going to throw it over to Rob. And Rob, the question is, what sort of member supports can we provide through these support grants? It seems like it is mostly for paying salaries or living allowances. Oh, sorry, salaries.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll take a stab at that and see if other panelists want to jump in. Generally, it's interesting that you asked that, because we're actually working through all of our guidelines right now to figure out what are the things that we are permitted to pay for through a support grant. And we're having a little bit of a civics 101 class here as we talked about the budget and how the budget works. Just a reminder, we're a federal agency. We are the only reason the VISTA program can operate and be paid for through congressional appropriations is because Congress, in their wisdom many years ago, created this program and through legislation. And so we operate through particular rules through our statute, through the Domestic Volunteer and Service Act. And that really guides us in the sorts of things that we can pay for. So we do think of supervision, the supervision needed to support VISTA members as a critical way to support VISTA members. Our studies, our implementation studies over many years tell us one of the key components to project success and to good VISTA members' experiences is that relationship between a supervisor and a member. and the type of support that supervisor is able to provide to those individuals as they go about through their service. So supervision, we do think, is a really critical piece to supporting members. We are also able to reimburse organizations for the cost of, say, VISTA members who have to, during their service, carry out activities that is going to create a cost for travel and transportation, so like during the day. And so we sort of think of these as supervision and transportation costs. We're kind of looking at now what else might be available, but at this point, it's limited to those few line items, and then the rest of the living allowance, for the most part, comes directly from CNCF, from AmeriCorps to the member, and all those other things are sort of regulated that way.
Thank you, Rob. These next couple of questions are going to be for you, Meg. We have a question around an additional cost of living increase. Will there be one proposed, or is there one currently proposed other than the August increase that we saw this year?
Yep. Thanks, Beth. Great question. And I apologize if I wasn't clear. So we have had 2 living allowance increases in the last 2 fiscal years. So there was one made in fiscal year 2020. And then the one that I referenced that I led in August of 2021, in fiscal year 21. And that was about a 12% increase. So as of right now, there are no additional increases in living allowance planned. The ARP funds, the American Rescue Plan funds, included actually an explicit direction that some of the funds needed to be spent on increasing the living allowance. And so this is a great situation of being told to do something that you want to do anyway. And I made the decision that I thought it was more powerful and important and impactful to our members and the work to have it be one larger increase that could happen earlier. So having the dollars now were more valuable, particularly as we continue to struggle with, the impact of COVID. So we did one significant increase. It's one of the largest single year increases. I think it was a 12% increase to the minimum living allowance. That went into effect on August 15th at that payroll, and continues to be and will continue to be in effect. But we have no additional plans for a living allowance increase as of right now. Thank you for clarifying that.
Thanks, Meg. The next question is also, I believe, for you. And it's in regards to expanding access to participation. And the question is, would VISTA consider allowing grant funds to go towards housing stipends for members? The individual is saying that they're an intermediary and they encourage their sites to help VISTA members with housing as much as they can, but it isn't always feasible for smaller organizations. So would a baseline housing stipend for members be a reasonable way to expand access for VISTA member opportunities? And I'll stop there for right now.
Yeah. We know that housing is a huge issue, and I will again invite Rob in to talk about the specifics in terms of what you can and can't do, because he has the institutional knowledge and the policy acumen that I rely on a daily basis. I would just say, as an overarching point, housing is a huge issue. We're seeing this across the country, and we know is a limiting factor in terms of people participating, being able to serve in the places where they want to serve, and also, finishing their term of service. So, when I laid out and it could be the cost of housing, it could be just the other lack of it, right? There's many different issues here. And I know that some sponsors have gotten creative about this. And again, Rob can indicate what you can and can't do as of right now. I will say that I'm working with the team in headquarters for that fourth priority around expanding access, we're doing a more comprehensive evaluation of member benefits. We know that the living allowance is a huge piece, but it's not the only one. We know that education award, or for some a cash stipend, is actually a very large motivator. It could be health benefits, and just asking questions around, when we really think about expanding access, what does that look like, and what value do members put on different benefits, and how do we also make sure that more members are utilizing the benefits? So for instance, the non-competitive eligibility for federal jobs for the year after you successfully complete your term of service. Not everyone knows about that, and they need to if it's something that they want to utilize. So I would just say at a bigger level, we are kind of reevaluating member benefits because we know it's so important. And sort of are doing some deep thinking about what this looks like moving forward. So again, we can expand access and also enhance the member experience. But Rob, do you want to share kind of what you can and can't do around housing supports right now?
Sure. Yeah, I'll do my best. And, as I said earlier, some of this is what is prescribed to us by statute, by what Congress has told us, and what flexibilities do we have? And I think, Meg, you articulated, what are the flexibilities? What the starting place is the living allowance, which I think, Congress generally intended to be allow for an individual to serve as a member and, cover the costs to live at the economic, I think the statutory language is live at the economic level of the individuals, the beneficiaries of the projects, right? This implies at poverty level. Our calculations for the living allowance rate include HUD fair market rents. We do an annual review of that, and we look at what the housing costs are in particular counties and cities, and we adjust for that. So we do factor housing into the living allowance to the degree that we're allowed to. And then I think what we are trying to do now is explore even further what we can do around the living allowance rate. In terms of, what we've seen sponsors do, and I think this is implied in the question, sponsors, we do encourage sponsors, knowing that housing is a real challenge. It can be a barrier. We've seen, everyone's following the economic variables. Housing costs are inflating during this pandemic period at a rate that is much different than prior years. So that is a moving target in some ways. And so we encourage every VISTA sponsor to work with prospective members helping them figure out housing situations. I was a VISTA. I stayed with my supervisor in their house for a while as I transitioned to a new community before I was able to secure housing on my own. We encourage things like that. We encourage housing stipends and have loosened to the degree that we can the ability of sponsors and sites to provide that. But we also know that not everyone can. So that is something that we are considering in terms of our equity as we, as Meg said, take a longer look at what the package that we're able to provide to members looks like. But that's where we are at the moment.
Thanks, Rob. One question for you about reporting. There's a question around some of the statistics that folks were reporting on seem new to 2021. And if there will be changes for 2022, when will sponsors learn of them? They want to make sure that they're measuring correctly throughout the year.
Thanks for that. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we went through a process to streamline the questions down from 14 to 10 this year. I don't expect that we're going to have differences in questions, and I think if anything, we've made the questions a little bit easier. So previously, for example, we asked you to report on the community volunteers who were recruited as one data element, and the number of community volunteers who were being managed through your VISTA project as a separate one. So we've consolidated that, recognizing that trying to separate those things out is a little bit of a burden. We want to try to get you that data, those data elements as far in in advance as we can. We do go through a process working with the Office of Management and Budget to accept public comment. So those were available out for public comment about a year ago. And then from there, we're, part of what we're doing here is making the reports available publicly and trying to encourage you, knowing that this is a transition year, to check in with your portfolio managers if you have questions about data elements, and they can work with you on what data collection strategies might be appropriate.
Thanks, Rob. We have just a few minutes left. So Meg, I'm going to throw one more question at you, and I think lots of people would be interested to hear the answer to this. And are there any scheduled updates, improvements for the eGrant site? Folks have been experiencing incredible difficulties submitting progress reports due to errors and timeouts.
eGrants. Can't talk about doing any additional good work without tackling eGrants, which I totally agree with. So here's where things currently are with eGrants and the portal. So as I mentioned, the American Rescue Plan provides, thanks, Abby, provides, designated funding for each program. Actually, it provides funding for AmeriCorps State National, AmeriCorps VISTA, and AmeriCorps Seniors, and then some overall funding for the agency to provide, kind of those supports. And so the agency has prioritized using a large amount of that money to really identify and transition in terms of a technical solution that will address both eGrants and the member portal. I think there's room, signs for optimism, and a very widespread recognition around the need for change and vast improvements of the system. I do want to caution that to do this right, this is a multi-year process. So there are kind of short-term fixes being done, in the near term that, are what is going to be your reality, again, for the short term. But there's a robust conversation about actually making the transition and doing it in the right way. So that is underway. I think that brings us to our time. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions. These are great questions. I also don't want to end on eGrants. That just doesn't feel right. So I'm going to go back to my my current obsession, which is the child tax credit. I included a bunch of links. When I shared the amount, I shared kind of the average that a family receives. But there's one amount that you receive for kids that are 0 to 6, another that is 7 to 17, and it's sort of based on your income. So again, if you go to the 2 links that I shared, and I included a Spanish version as well, you can read more about that in terms of the overall amount and what's possible. But that was a lot. We covered a lot of bases, and I love the active chat. I love the great questions. Thank you so much for your engagement, for just your thoughtfulness, your candid feedback, and most importantly, for your service and support of our VISTAs. So this is going to be our last sponsor call of this calendar year. We're going to go ahead and kind of schedule out all of our quarterly sponsor calls for next year. But if you've got questions, comments, opinions in the short term, never hesitate to reach out to your portfolio manager. That is what they are there for. And we don't want you to feel like you have to wait for a sponsor call to get something addressed or to raise a concern. So finally, we would love to get your feedback on our call. We always want to think about how to improve this. And so please click on the link that was just provided in the chat by Jeff, and we welcome your feedback. But with that, thank you for an incredible fiscal year, and excited about what we're going to be able to do together in the coming year. Thank you again.